relationships.com. Um, for this live that I want to do today on this Saturday, I want to address a topic that is close to my heart and something that I actually had to learn about as I um, matured in within my marriage. It was a quote that I saw that if your childhood trauma is not addressed, can it show up in your marriage? And I actually read an article about this, and I discovered that indeed it can show up in your marriage. And I was thinking about my own triggers as a child and what I went through and but what bothered me about the situation that my grandparents were in, the situation that my parents were in. And one thing that bothered me a lot was that both of those families or both branches of the family were broken. So my parents were not married. They broke up by the time I was 3, from what I've been told over the years. And my grandparents broke up the year before I went into high school. And that was rough because it's a transitional year, it's a transitional age. So it was really, really difficult to see them not like each other in that moment. And they had many of those. Another one of my triggers is family secrets. There's sharing men, cheating. Um, my experiences with having, a blended family that was unintentionally blended, because my dad had 5 children with 4 women. My mother had 5 children with 4 men. And I know they wanted their previous relationships to work out, and they just didn't. They just didn't work out. So, and that's okay. They weren't supposed to. And I don't, as a woman that's over 40, judge a 19 and a 20-year-old for having me. And they just weren't prepared to be parents. They didn't know what to do. So, from what my father told me, from what my mother told me, and what my grandmother has told me, because she witnessed all of it, I believe all of them about the experiences that they had. So although my parents didn't wish to have so many children, um, they were in situations that were not healthy, and they were just unprepared. They didn't have the tools that I feel like I've learned to use and identify. So also the drug abuse, the alcoholism, the injustice, the inconsistency was very difficult to grow up in. So that kind of made it hard as a married woman to focus on what I needed to focus on. I was always worried that something would go wrong, something would happen, because I was constantly getting fed this negativity by my grandmother. She was upset about her situation. She was upset um, that her marriage didn't work, and her bitterness um, entered my life, because I think what she was trying to do was protect me. But she wasn't protecting me, she was hurting me, because she was giving me the narrative of what marriage looked like, and it was a very blanket statement. And marriages are different from couple to couple. And to compare your marriage to someone else's marriage can be violent. You don't have to hit somebody to be violent. You can think violent thoughts and to go, oh, their husband is that way or that wife is that way. I wish you were that way. That comparison, there's violence in it. So I learned that as my daughter got married last year, alhamdulillah, I'm so proud of her. I learned to stay in my lane when it comes to her marriage. So I want her to have peace in her marriage. And I want everybody to win. So I'm not the kind of person, and I'm also not going through a divorce, that wants to put negativity in her marriage, because that's what happened to me. My grandmother would say these things and it'd be real vicious, and I wasn't ready. So I took them to heart, because I'm like, oh, she loves me, so she's trying to help me. However, I was practicing a culture that was something that I was embracing and she was not. So to talk to someone that is not embracing polygyny, to talk to someone that's against polygyny, to talk to someone that's against Islam wasn't serving my marriage. She was telling me the opposite things, you know? So it was kind of a gift and a curse in my mind, because she would say these nice things and then she'd take it away by saying something that was vicious, you know. She'd say stuff like, oh, you got to draw a picture for a man, like their brains have left the chat. They can't think for themselves. She'd say these things because that's what she went through. That was her own trauma. And that's her childhood trauma that entered her marriage. And by the end of it, they both had destroyed the marriage. They both, in equal parts, had destroyed their own marriage. And that was something I was not willing to do. That's something I'm still not willing to do. One thing I found is that the things that my husband, Coach Nazir, was not aware of, I made him aware of. So if things happened to me as a child, if something happened with my parents, if there was a violent trigger and I was nervous or whatever, I ultimately said, I have to let him know what's going on, because he can't read my mind and he doesn't know my entire story. He still doesn't, and I still don't know his. That's for him, that's for me, that's, you know, some things we go to our graves with, and that's okay, as long as those things are not destroying us inside. Because if we feel like we need to talk to someone about those things, then we need to seek counseling. I'm not a counselor. I'm a coach of marriage and polygyny, especially. But I will never tell someone not to get help if they feel as though they need the help. I like to be in a space where I'm humble and I say, listen, I'll never say to someone, don't go fix yourself. I'll say the opposite. Go fix yourself. Go find out what works with you. Have it as to where you give yourself permission to heal, because that's kind of what I had to do. I said, I can't take on these people's heartbreak, my grandparents, my parents. I got to deal with in my own marriage and not allow outside forces to destroy my marriage. And they'll destroy it through you if you let it. If you let them, if you let it, which is those negative things that we say to ourselves. Some of the side effects of not addressing trauma will be mood swings, confusion, shutting your partner out, depression. There could be some depression there. It happens. Also, I noticed that taking out anger on someone else, you know, this displaced anger. When I'm upset with someone, I have to think, I'm like, you know what, Fatimah, do they deserve my upset for someone else? And they don't. So then I have to reel myself in and say, you know what? They don't deserve this anger. It's for someone else. So Coach Nadir had talked about transitioning, you know, your energy, your mood, and especially for men in polygyny. One thing that happens in one house shouldn't bleed into the other house. Our husband always says that, and it's the truth. Coach Nyla and I know that full well. We know that. Just from general principle, that if you have a negative issue going on with one house versus, or one relationship versus your other relationship or marriage, it shouldn't bleed into what's going on at your home. That's between you and the person you're in the marriage with, because the women are monogamously married to the man. We're not married to one another. I get we've gotten that question before, and we are not. That is not part of our culture. So, but we, for clarity, we address that and we say, listen, what happens in one house shouldn't affect another house, especially as far as the man is concerned. And the women keep their things or their privacy within their own home, in their own home, because they had their own trauma too. The husband has trauma, the co-wives have trauma, the children can have their own trauma. And if we don't talk about those things in time, they'll show up in our marriage. Some of the things that keep me grounded outside of what is, you know, in Islam, which is my salats, when we pray and when we read Quran, and different things such as that. There's a few books that I've invested in reading and doing different exercises in to keep me grounded. And one thing I had to learn about is the 5 love languages. This book right here, so good, by Gary Chapman. It talks about, the 5 areas and the 5 different love languages. So if you want to learn more about that, uh, grab this book. And also my co-wife, Coach Nyla, actually did a training for our MIC Relationship Mastery Inner Circle members. And you can become a Relationship Mastery Inner Circle member by visiting outstandingpersonalrelationships.com/RM for Relationship Mastery. So check that out. We have some really, really great trainings. And we didn't have this when we first started practicing in polygyny as a family. We didn't have it. There was nothing out there. People were not having this conversation 11 years ago. They weren't. It was super taboo. In some areas it still is, but I noticed that people are talking about it more because it's becoming more common. Still disliked, but becoming more common and more easy to open up these spaces and platforms to talk about them, because OPR, Outstanding Personal Relationships, is a safe space. So for people to talk about marriage and polygyny. So we really want to protect that for those members of our audience or the people that support us, to be able to talk about polygyny, men and women, because they don't have that support everywhere. So we want to be that, say if you want to see change in the world, be that change that you want to see in the world. So shout out to the OPR team. Another book, I picked this up recently. It says 52 lists for happiness. There's different writing prompts in this book. And it's so good. It's a weekly journal of inspiration for positivity, balance, and joy. I'm going to just share with you really quickly what one of the writing prompts is. It says, list ways that you think someone you love would describe you. That's really good. I can't wait to get to that page, but each day I will be writing in this book because I love to celebrate what's going right instead of focusing on what's going wrong. Another book that I picked up years and years ago, such a good read, Peace from Broken Pieces, How to Get Through What You're Going Through, by Miss Elanya Van Zandt. Elanya is so awesome. I love her. I'm Muslim. Clearly, I practice Islam. So some of the things that she does talk about, I can't get with, only because she inserts some of her religious beliefs in her books, and that's okay. It's her book. If it doesn't apply, let it fly. So I just go right by that and get to the meat and potatoes of a lot of what she says, and I really like her a lot. This guy I love, John C. Maxwell, Winning with People. Oh my goodness. I can't say enough about this. And these are books that we've read more than once. Sometimes the way my brain is set up, guys, I have to read things more than once, take notes and everything else, because I will forget. My co-wife actually gifted me this next book, and she also gifted this to my daughter, the one that's married. It's by Fawn Weaver, The Argument-Free Marriage. This is such a good read. Such a good read. Invest in books. Don't be afraid to read them, because there's so much great information out there. Another JCM, John C. Maxwell. My co-wife and I went to a communication course that lasted, I think it was 8 weeks. And I miss it so much. We got to bond and laugh, and we had a good time together when we went to, because we went together. This one, Everyone Communicates, Few Connect. We saw this book at that particular course that we were taking together, and we both have it. We both have read this book, and especially The Argument-Free Marriage. Both read that. This is a book I picked up. This is actually a journal, and it's called Today I Affirm. It's a journal that nurtures self-care, and it has writing prompts in it as well. Now, I'm not in each one of these books every day, no, but they are definitely in my literary arsenal. The journals that I use keep me conscious and aware of what's going good, and I practice gratitude within those journals, and I try to figure out where I need to work at. I record it, and I have other journals and notebooks and things of that nature to keep myself accountable to, support whatever my marital goals are. Every day I pick a marital goal. The other day was togetherness. Yesterday was quiet, meaning say less. If I want to say something, I say less, because my co-wife and I are married to an introvert. She's an introvert. She knows how it is. I do not. I'm an extrovert. But I know they like their quiet. So I like to offer quiet instead of talking about everything at once, because sometimes when you talk to your spouse about everything at once, what are they supposed to do with it when you're saying everything you want to say and just dump everything on them at once? They have to have time to process things. So one thing I learned about being a child and becoming an adult and a mother, I'm a wife and mother, was that I had to give myself the opportunity to process information before I say something that I regret. I've not perfected it, of course, but I'm more patient with that process. And I want to embrace that more, because it's just going to serve my marriage in the long run. It's just going to build me and stretch me into being the best representation of Fatimah that I want to be, because nobody else can be me. I'm in this body 24/7 until my soul is not in it anymore. So I have to take care of what I have, and I have to tell myself, look, those things happened in the past. I don't want them to affect my present, because I have to allow those things to affect me. I have to allow those things to wiggle their way within my marriage. I have to allow those things to negatively affect my mothering, because sometimes our childhood traumas will show up in our mothering and fathering of our children. So I want to be very purposeful every day, wake up with an attitude of gratitude and say, look, that stuff happened. I have to move on. I've talked often about my father's alcohol and drug abuse. He was an alcoholic before, more than anything, and he dabbled in drugs. But he was a functioning alcoholic with a degree in working on his PhD when he passed away. One of my traumas as an adult was getting the call that he passed away and finding him along with my grandmother, his mother. We went to his house, and he was dead on the floor. So I understand death, and I understand why people must go. I get that. But it hits different when you see your parent laying somewhere or just dead, period. And I use it as a teachable moment. And I said, well, measure this thing out. What kind of daughter were you to him? Were you a good daughter to him? Could have you been better? And then ultimately, my brother had to help the medical examiner's team remove him from the premises. So I said to myself, I'm going through this right now. This is a trauma for me. However, my brother's trauma is different than my trauma from this experience. And within that, I was grateful, because my role was not his that day. Mine was different. My test was different. So, but if I had a thought about it in a negative way, I would have said, well, oh no, forget him. This is my trauma, and I'm going to allow this to wreck my, family when I get home. I remember just going into my home saying, okay, this happened. I need to be calm. I need to be relaxed, and I need to get the hugs that I need and not traumatize the other people in my house based off of what I just went through. So that permission had to be granted. It's either granted in a negative way or it's granted in a positive way. But I knew I had to reel myself in. So I'm going to end on that note. Have an attitude of gratitude, have those hard conversations, and maybe find out if your spouse is willing to share what has went on, what's going on, and maybe we can understand to understand and not just create decoration for the heart. Let's communicate to understand versus just, asking because it sounds nice. Okay, I'm going to leave you with a little GLC, but before that, please contact us or connect with us at outstandingpersonalrelationships.com. And if you want to join us on our socials here at YouTube, we're Outstanding Personal Relationships, or on IG at Outstanding Relationships, because Outstanding Personal Relationship was too long. Again, I'm Coach Fatimah, one of the co-founders. And I'm going to leave you again with GLC. Make sure you're growing intentionally, loving fearlessly, and connecting on a higher level every single day. I'll see you guys in the next one. Assalamu alaikum. Peace.